nice year, 100 years, a fun year. So how do we do it? I find it really interesting that today, if I don't get tied up in the cord and fall over, that William Stinchcomb, well over 100 years ago, that we're in a factory here that remained in business for well over 90 years. I got a little bit of the history. It was a broom factory. But to know that Cleveland at one time was, on the forefront in the Industrial Revolution, fifth largest city, William Stinchcomb thought of this park system, the governance structure, really very interesting to think of the apolitical nature of parks. A lot of communities throughout the country politicize parks. They end up in different positions depending on funding sources, but they really impact everyone. And the way it was set up in Ohio, which is a model for the country, is there's 88 counties, there's one probate judge, there's only one elected official. That elected official appoints 3 unpaid volunteer commissioners to help set the policy. They then in turn hire myself and the CFO to run the organization, which has really allowed it to grow. There's only been 9 probate judges, there's only been 36 park commissioners, and there's only been 6 heads of its agency in 100 years. So when you want to think about why and how the continuity has happened, that is why, because they believe in leadership, they believe in stability, they believe in the mission of conservation, education, and recreation. And this morning for the talk, I wanted to talk about relevancy and the curiosity that is around it. How are we going to continue to reach new audiences? I use my son Carter, who's 15. He doesn't know the world without the internet. I think his smartphone is part of his appendage. Wherever he goes with it. But the park system was really designed to get people out, disconnect. And when you think of what William Stinchcomb did 100 years ago, the city center, he built this park system, acquired 9 reservations, pushed out 15,000 acres all the way around, surrounding the city in really what they call the Emerald Necklace. And so now that we're 101 years old, we'll turn 101 this year, we have been really focused on one of our core strategies, which is relevancy. It's how do we continue to be relevant in the world today? How do we make parks purposeful and keep pushing the envelope forward? And that's what the presentation is going to be about today. So this is our West Creek facility. This is in Parma, Ohio, the 8th largest community. Really science-based learning. We have students from CMSD and the city of Parma come through this facility. This is all state-of-the-art. We use iPads, we use digital imagery. We're going to show some of the unique things that we do. I remember walking out of Rocky River about 3 years ago, the Rocky River Nature Center, and one of the naturalists introduced me to a group of students that were out for a tour and a hike that day, and they all kind of put their head down and just kind of nodded very nicely. And when I pulled my phone out to kind of look at our app that we were working on, the students thought it was just absolutely fantastic, and they were telling stories of the things that they like to do. And to me, that was that aha moment of how are we going to take what they know and how are we going to bring that into the natural realm where we technically want people to unplug when they actually come out to the parks. But we knew that we had to connect them, and Jacqueline has been very helpful. What we're going to show here is the sandbox. So if anybody's played Xbox before, our team actually created this in-house to actually show imagery where we bring students in from all over. They can move the sand. It's literally in a sandbox. And what you're seeing there is the topography changes and what happens when you build and move land and move things around, where water goes, where it acquires, where it scalps. But this is hands-on. This is where kids, like this space that we're in today, it's hands-on. It's getting people creative. You can actually put your fingers in and move, and it will show you the whole topography and then what will happen over time. So here is the sandbox actually in play in our water lab. In the upper left corner there, students are getting to actually pull through with their fingers. In the bottom one, we've actually got the ability, we've used some plastics, and we actually have a water filter that goes up over the top and actually can show how, when you build in certain areas where you probably shouldn't have built, how it affects everything downstream. So we, Cleveland Metroparks, own the most land that's connected to water in the entire state of Ohio, whether it be at the Chagrin River, whether it be at the Cuyahoga River now, and certainly the Rocky River. We are the basin here. And it was interesting, I came from Madison, Wisconsin, and most times you think that water flows south, right? South. Well, everything in this bowl all flows north, and about 85% of it flows through the Cleveland Metroparks property. So that is what we were working on to show the interconnection. This is something that we are working on now. This is so we showed the sandbox and how to interact. This is now, anybody's using HoloLens by show of hands? Anybody using that technology? One person? Okay, you're from CASE, I know that. Which is really good. We're actually partnering with CASE on this. So how we're doing things differently is we actually put on a presentation. This is not seen yet to the general public. This is the new welcome pavilion at the zoo. This is actually one of our conference rooms in our main headquarters. We can actually take people through what it will look like. You can actually go inside and see how this building is going to be put into play, what it's going to look like, what the beams are going to look like. So it's really a unique tool that we are working on. We actually did a board presentation, and it is absolutely wild, the things that you can do. Here you can create things and model. Now we're actually putting it into play in a very different way. So a lot of fun, great partnership with Case Western Reserve University as well. Here's something else that we're working on. So, how to make the seen unseen. We are working on 3D imagery and how a monarch lays its egg. It is really remarkable to see the interactivity. These are things that you would have to be stationary in a park for a long period of time to be able to see any of this this level of activity. And now we can actually bring it into a classroom. We're doing virtual classrooms, but to be able to see this whole process unfold, this is pretty remarkable stuff. But again, we're marrying technology. We're taking what we do and what we've done for 100 years from the conservation side, the recreation side, the education side, and actually pulling it into the next century of stewardship. Anybody think that's pretty cool? You can come see it when it's ready to go. We're looking forward to rolling it out into our nature centers and beyond. The hackathon. So we own over 5 drones, but we're actually working with a group to put on an IT hackathon to help bring in that other side of the mission of what we're trying to do again with our conservation, education, recreation. We're going to provide a hackathon and bring the community and innovative ideas together. We're working with a lot of local partners here to help solve things in the future. And again, when I talked about relevancy at the start, it's how do we connect people? How do we stay relevant? When you think of a park system that's had a long-standing history, 100 years in the community, how do we really pivot and not take things for granted moving forward? How do we look to engage the community? And we thought this was one way of getting youth involved and technology involved in the natural realm as we go. Zoo exhibits, if anybody's had a chance to get to the zoo, we have really taken a look at how we look at our guest experience. It's really interesting to see the new interaction. The way exhibits used to go was basically we would go look at a small exhibit and then we would just keep moving on. Now we've really made them to larger complexes. You can see this is the Roseboro Tiger Passage. It's really interesting to know that the humans that are on the one side, thankfully, and the tiger, the Amur tiger that's on the other side, they can get that close to each other through the glass. And when we first opened the exhibit, one of the cats came up and the breath actually showed up on the glass and the kids just kind of moved back, which was, again, cultivating the level of curiosity. What does this animal look like up front? When you look at the giraffe that's down there, we're feeding lettuce to it, which is a great interaction. A tongue on a giraffe can be up to 18 inches long. Anybody know what their color of their tongue is?
Purple.
Ooh, very good. Right out of the chute early this morning. Why is it purple?
I assume because of what they eat?
No, actually, so she got the question right. The color of the tongue is purple, but it's purple because of the sun so that it doesn't get sunburnt. So when you think of in the wild, they're always reaching. So that's your fun fact for the morning about giraffes. But this is a great interaction tool. We're continuing to look at new exhibits. We've got a new exhibit, Asian Highlands, that will be coming on board. We're also looking at how we communicate. The level of engagement is really interesting, and to see the amount of technology that's even sitting in this room here today to put on a presentation, leveraging social media. Our team is the best in the country in the park and rec world, hands down. There isn't a Facebook page that is more robust. We have the second largest Twitter following of any park system besides Central Park in New York. And the work that Danielle and Kelly and Jacqueline all do behind the scenes, taking guests and bringing real live experiences. This morning we rolled out, if you're curious about, our new little rhino calf. That is, you're going to have a chance to help secure a future for wildlife, which is really how we're looking at the zoos, how we're looking at moving them forward. This happens to be a female, which is a fantastic thing for the zoo world. There are not many of these animals left in the world. We actually have another rhino that's pregnant as well, and so we're really leading the way, but we're also being able to leverage the opportunities. When you saw the gorilla, we just worked on new gorilla transfer chutes. We're actually, instead of using steel, using now high compressed polyfibers and new materials that are actually lighter in order to get them into buildings where we would have had to use cranes to move things. So again, social media in a very new way and how we're pushing what we're doing. Curious, why do we get involved in the water taxi? That's a question that we got early on, but this is really, it's about a connection to the community in place through the waterfront here. This has been very well received. ArcelorMittal funded it last year. All the rides were free. They have chosen to come back and participate again, which is absolutely fantastic. But this, about 5 years ago, the Cuyahoga River, it's still in the area of concern. There's still a lot of work to do with actually making it cleaner and better. We're getting there. We're looking at taking out some of the impoundments down in Bonnie Park and continuing to get the water better. But this was one of President Obama's top 50 water trails in the country. It did not come with any funding, but it came with the designation that it was an important corridor to make the connection. Why this is so important to us is it connects the east and the west bank together, and just up the road as you're looking to the east here, we're working on the Cleveland Foundation Centennial Trail that helps connect our community to the waterfront through Whiskey Island, and then all the way down through the Cuyahoga Valley National Park, Summit Parks, Stark, and continuing on. Merwin's Wharf, that is a really interesting thing for the Park District. Some would ask why, or curious why we got into this business. I can tell you it wasn't really a dream of ours. It wasn't something that we had fully baked. But what happened is that this piece of property, again, I think when you see the groundswell and the incubation and the things that are going on here, a group of individuals through the Cleveland Rowing Foundation had a site. They had a vision, but they didn't have all the pieces in place to get things done. What happened is that they positioned this and asked the park if we would be interested in acquiring some land on the Cuyahoga River. The only land that we had on the Cuyahoga River was Ohio and Erie Canal. When we saw this as the opportunity when I came on in 2010, this was a very unique opportunity to connect people to the waterfront again. It's a 6.5 to 7 acre park. We worked with the city of Cleveland to put in the Crooked River skate park. And with the group from downtown, we moved that over there. But how this all evolved is that this facility was the old Commodore Club. If anybody remembers that, it was going to turn into a used boatyard instead of a recreation opportunity unless we stepped in. We stepped in. The facility actually had a liquor license that was attached to it, which has value in the city of Cleveland because there are only so many of them. But any lawyers in the audience? Oh, they're all working today. Good. So I can talk about them. But anybody that knows anything about liquor laws, they're very hard. They're very kind of draconian here in the state of Ohio, but it was in safekeeping. It was set to expire, which means that it was going to be extinguished and given back. We had to actually provide food service. If anybody had been down there, it was literally a shed where boats were being maintained. That's what this facility was. Ken's in the back. He's nodding his head. There were pallets and all sorts of shenanigans that were happening down there. Mitchell Schneider from First Interstate was actually closing a Borders bookstore down in Strongsville. The things were getting repurposed. They were getting essentially jettisoned to the dumps. We took the coffee shop out of the Borders bookstore and actually put it into this facility, got our food service license, which then got us our liquor license out of the state of Ohio. Well, meanwhile, back at the ranch, people started to come down and say, hey, what's going on? Well, we didn't really have a plan. We were serving, I think, cold sandwiches, chips, and like soda. But people started to show up, and we said, hey, we've got something here. So we put a little more money into it. We cleaned the ceilings up. Next thing you know, more people started to show up, more opportunities, and Creative Mornings was there over 2 years ago. And now it turned into this waterfront dining experience. Why it's important to us, if you're curious, is that it's an education component for us as well. So the Lock 44 room is designed for education. It's one of the only spots in the Cuyahoga River for public access. And so that's why we ended up here at this particular location. It's really interesting to hear from the residents in the area. This now has become their park and their connection to the Metroparks along the way. We've got another option. We are working on the East 55th facility, which is in your bottom right corner there. When we took over that facility, if anybody was a boater, you got to use the facility. If you were a non-boater in Cleveland, you didn't get to use the facility because it was completely fenced off. Joe Rozek, our COO, is in the audience. I think in the first week we took all the fences down. We took torches and chop saws. We knocked the entire fence down and started inviting the public into the waterfront area. The Emerald Necklace Marina, which is up on top there, is undergoing a $500,000 renovation restoration. That facility on the Rocky River actually got taken out over 21 years ago by an ice flow. It needed a refresh, and we're working on, again, connecting people and place to the waterfront, and it's been a lot of fun to see people re-engaged. You saw in the video the Edgewater Beach House. That was, when I think of curiosity, I think of coming here 10 years ago, not 10 years ago, in 2010, and I was curious why nothing was being done with the lakefront. And so my tie to curiosity this morning is really that top slide, which is really, really emblematic of what's going on in Cleveland with the Renaissance. Our team worked very hard in 2013. It's hard to believe we're going into our 6th year already. We took it over in 2013. Last year, our Centennial year, which the gentleman from Tri-C is playing in the Centennial Plaza. But I was really curious as to why this couldn't happen in Cleveland. And our Board of Park Commissioners, when we were looking at this, we were down there in the dead of winter, and we were looking at where to put this facility and how to put this facility in play. And it has turned out more than we could think. But there were some really unique components to this. The tie to the relevancy. It was done strategically to build a bridge to the Detroit Shoreway neighborhood to link the community where the highway actually chopped through the community, where the train tracks chopped through the community. We wanted to show that bridge. We wanted to show that connection to community and place to be able to tie things together. We wanted an outdoor experience. There is a whole history behind how we got here with the 365-degree views, but it is, by a show of hands, how many people have had a chance to get to the new? Very nice. For those of you that didn't raise your hand, we'll open in early May and have a chance to come down to see Edgewater live. But it is really, truly emblematic of what's going on in Cleveland, the evenings with the Edgewater Live concert series and all of the new activities, with the sunset, with the food trucks, and all of the unique things. So we no longer have to be curious as to why Cleveland can't have it. We now have it. So that is the end of the presentation, and I will gladly take questions as long as Tom does not give me the hook early.